I was considered a subject matter expert in strategic thinking, strategic planning. I got invited to speak, which was really my first time to ever be in front of a group of people. But I thought, well, you know this stuff inside and out. You've developed the systems and processes. You've been doing it for 10 years. I'll walk in the park. Until I got there, and after about 20 minutes into my presentation, I realized that no one was really listening to me anymore. I could tell they were getting restless. Of course, my first thought was, what's wrong with these people? I mean, I'm the subject matter expert. I got the 7-point readiness checklist, the 5 things you have to avoid, this 12-step process. But the clincher was all the way in the back room. It's one of those long rooms. There was a gentleman in the very back row, and he was leaning back, looking up at the ceiling, counting the ceiling tiles. I could see his finger, and I realized, wait, he's calculating the square footage of this room, and that's more interesting to him than what I'm saying. How can that be? So on the way home, I stopped at our local bookstore because I was like, that was fun, but you really were bad at it, so you need to find out how to do something. I bought a book by a gentleman named Mel Silberman. He's old school. He was talking about brain-based learning before anyone ever used those terms, brain-based learning. I just took a deep dive into how do you engage. And at the same time, I had 3 teenage sons who would spend hours in our rec room with their friends playing games. I couldn't get them to study for a test for 20 minutes, but 5 hours later, you'd still hear them out there just laughing and having fun and, trash talking and encouraging. And I just started really plugging into what's going on out there that keeps them so engaged for so long. And I started combining it. And this was years before I knew gamification was even. So that was 2004, 5, 6. And then 2012 is when I found out that gamification was actually a thing, a movement, a trend. And I started really getting plugged into the community at that time. I've learned so much from having a couple grandbabies that I missed the first time around with kids, but just watching them learn. They learn constantly. I have a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old, and they do not quit. I mean, they might get frustrated and walk away, but they come right back to it. That intrinsic desire inside of us to master something it's just an innate part of us that we're born with. But throughout school and education, I think that, I say it gets beat out of us. I don't mean literally, but people get discouraged. People start believing falsehoods about their ability to learn, don't quit your day job kind of thing. You don't have the creativity for this. You don't have the skill for that. I think by the time our adult learners get into the workplace, they have so many falsehoods about learning. I remember in elementary school being punished for being too active by being made to go sit in the corner and read. And if you think about just how messed up that whole, reading is your punishment. And so when we think about what would make learning more enticing to people, how could we get them more engaged with what we need them to learn so they can do something different? The answer always comes back to, well, let's make it more fun. Let's make it more like a game. Let's make it something. I mean, that's what it always comes back to. How would we get them? You ask any audience, you don't even have to, you're not even seeding them with any ideas but you ask the question, what if they did not have to take your course? And how would you design it differently if it was optional? Or if it was optional between you and an outside vendor and they could choose? What would you do to make your course something more appealing to them? Mm-hmm. After just a few seconds, people will say, we'd make it more fun. Mm-hmm. And that's, there's so many falsehoods about what people can do, of what they believe about themselves, that I think we got to peel it all the way back and just take it down to, I just want to make sure and clarify, fun does not mean easy. Oftentimes people think when we say fun, we mean make it easy, and that's not. Sometimes fun is solving the most difficult challenge we've ever faced, but solving it is what's fun. So I just think we have to start peeling it back to what is fun, how do we bring that in? Like I was working with a group this week, and I had, there's activities or assignments they have to do, and you think about, oh my God, I have an assignment, I have to complete this. But what if there's a group of people and I say to them, I have a challenge for you. This is a problem that we need to solve, and these are the dynamics of it. These are the rules. This is the limitations of how we can just solve it. So, how would you do this if this is the outcome that we have to reach, rather than, just walking through, this is the challenge that we're facing, and not even using the challenge, this is a problem that we have, and this is your assignment to solve it. Now it just sounds like drudgery. But presenting it to a team as a challenge and overcoming obstacles and using those kind of game dynamics to include in that, like putting different countdown timers on things to make them accelerate and push through, and just even physical activity. Research shows that physical activity attached to learning makes learning stick. So there's so much that we can draw from the games to bring it into learning that really makes it effective defined by, I'm learning something so I can do something, not just to learn something. Like it's just the same thing over and over again, or it doesn't have meaning. Like, we attach points to something and people are accumulating points, but then they're like, well, what are we doing with these points? And like, what's the next step? Or another thing that I've seen, may not be boring as much as just become disinterested, is like, let's just say an example of one, I won't mention the app, but one of the apps that we were playing with, once you get on the leaderboard, if you're on the leaderboard first, you're going to stay there. So really only the first 5 teams ever. And so as they're showing the leaderboard up on the screen, if you're team 8, 9, or 10, after about the 7th question, you're like, well, it doesn't even matter what I answer, because evidently I'm never going to get up there. I don't have a chance to succeed. So now I just get disinterested in it. Plus there's that sense of unfairness or inequity to it. So I think it has to progress. I think that it has to have a meaning to it. You have to understand why this is here. You just can't slap some things on there and expect it to be fun. And I think it has to be considered equitable, that everyone has a chance. Even if we know someone's better, we still have the chance to improve, to get there, to perhaps win. Regardless of any age, my younger learners, because I do a lot of instructor-led, my younger learners dive in more quickly, and they also seem to work more quickly. Like they get through much. And so I have to think about mechanics to keep them engaged while we're waiting for the others to catch up, and how to use them perhaps as ambassadors. And so it's not that they engage, that their appeal to different ages, but they engage with them differently. I think more importantly is knowing who your learners are and developing those personas that whether they're young or old, or but culturally might be some differences, or just job-wise, somebody who chooses to go into engineering is someone different than who chooses to go into marketing. So what kind of game dynamics, mechanics might we want to include for them, and develop some personas, but not so much generationally. I think they just interact with them differently. Okay. Not right, not wrong, not good, not bad, just different. We came up with the idea because in the US, we really do have this gap for gamification in L&D. Unfortunately, in L&D, we're a little bit late to the party for gamification, especially here in the United States. And we're still like on that front side of that adoption curve. But people are interested in it. They want to know more, and they want to know specifically how they can use it within, their dynamic of, I've got to develop for 60,000 people, or I'm still doing instructor-led training and I develop all the training myself. I am the L&D department. So that whole span, and they want to know how they can personally use it. So we've worked with Training Magazine on a number of events, and I approached them this past year and I said, let's see about co-locating an event with you specifically for gamification in L&D. gamification can be external for customers or social, but as far as just for L&D, I didn't want it to be about loyalty programs or about weight loss apps. I wanted it to be specifically for adult education and talent management, talent development. And so Training Magazine got on board with it right away. And so we're going to be co-locating with them in October in Chicago. So it'll be the first weekend in October. We start with a kickoff party and pop-up escape room. A gentleman from Amsterdam's coming in to lead that for us. His name is Michel. I always get his last name Van Nieuwen. Michel Van Nieuwen's coming in from Amsterdam to lead that for us. So we have a whole gamut of international speakers. Growth engineering is going to be there as an ambassador. We're going to have ambassadors who are what would be typically in the role of a vendor, but we're not doing a vendor hall where you go through and get merch. The ambassadors are there just like it is in a gameplay. Ambassadors are the experts. They're the ones with the tips and the techniques and the little cheats and the tools, and they show others how they can succeed with it. So they'll be interacting throughout the conference with the learners who are there. So the people who are coming as participants will really get a chance to see all different kinds of applications of gamification, from like growth engineering, which is a truly gamified LMS platform, to something as simple as perhaps including a Kahoot game in your learning, and everything in between. But it'll be unique opportunities. So it runs Saturday night, all day Sunday, all day Monday, and then we roll on into Training Magazine's online learning conference, which is then another opportunity to get some good fundamentals of doing online learning and then incorporate that with the gamification that we've learned. So we are so excited about doing this event.